What is up, guys? It is actually Wombat right now, and I'm here. I didn't exactly learn this way, but I guess can be considered my 200 subscribers special. But I'm basically here with these three Kirby's bays because, well, this video is gonna be a list. It's gonna be a list of the top 10 most underrated Beyblade burst parts in the game. Yeah, so basically, what we're gonna be looking at is how popular the part is. So how many people think it's good, how many people use it, and how good it actually is. As in, like, it doesn't have to be top tier, but if it just has like a use that not a lot of people know about. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna line up these Beyblades in a line here and get started on the list. So before we jump into the actual list, I'd like to go over a few parts I wanted to give an honorable mention to because they're slightly underrated. So the first one up is going to be Sprez and S2, specifically the Hasbro version, because the Karatome version, the teeth are awful, it'll just self-burst too much. But this is shown to be a decent mixed attacker. It can compete with some of the earlier God series stuff, like BR, yeah, and I think everything past that will take it down, but it's not that bad. It's about the same level as Cillian Zeus or Beast Behemoth, probably even a little better. The Needle Driver. Yeah, unfortunately this didn't quite make the list because I don't see it as good as one other part that did make the list, but Needle has some good semi-aggressive movement, and that makes it good for, I guess, semi-mobile burst attack combos. So things like Valkyrie or Rockdivore, or I guess maybe even Sieg Excalibur on Needle could be good. Hold. Hold's not really as underrated or, yeah, overlooked as people think. It's just that with like Atomic and stuff, people just don't use it as much as it should be used. It is more or less like one of the poor man's Atomics. It should only ever be used in opposite spin though, because it's got some pretty good precision. It'll outspin a good amount of stuff, and it's also like an okay mobile defense part too, like L2 hold, DF hold. Those are good at taking down some right spin attackers. And finally, the Knuckle Disc. Knuckle is just kind of received, like, it's been kind of forgotten. It was never really like popular compared to Heavy, even though it's pretty much better than Heavy in a lot of ways. More stamina, harder to burst, more stamina, harder to burst. There was one other way, but I'm forgetting how at the moment. But those are still pretty hard advantages to argue with. And I feel like with like God Discs coming out, it's been kind of overlooked. But it's still a pretty good disc for raw stamina and burst resistance. I would put it on like Guardian Kirby's or Death Scyther Revolve if I had the chance. So that's all the honorable mention parts. Now we can get on to the actual list. So number 10 is Quad Quetzalcoatl. This is the prize layer of Random Booster 4, and it's been released in I think another random layer collection and 2 random boosters since then. I don't remember. But either way, the reason this is on number 10 on the list is because, I mean, it had like a limited period of usefulness for a limited amount of time, and it's still decent, but not really. Basically, by combining like its relatively good teeth with its smooth shape and the Excalibur-like shape, it makes a pretty good anti-attacker. Q2 Yell Extreme was the combo I came up with for this.
it was capable of beating most attack types, even like mixed ones and stationary ones, because it could just KO them. But now that it like is outweighed by a lot of attackers like LS, SX, I think GV and L2 outweigh it. Well, yeah, L2 definitely does. I don't know about GV. Um, it's kind of outclassed, not so much useful anymore. Um, Maybe with Hunter it could be decent, but I'm not sure. But yeah, it is kind of useful, and it's not as useless as people think it is. So Q2 is number 10 on the underrated parts list.
Alright, you could probably guess this was coming, and that this wouldn't be a wombat list without either of these parts on it, but number 9 is a tie between armed and down. Now these discs both have pretty similar purposes, they've got similar shapes, but basically what they did was that they were some of the hardest discs to burst in the game, and I'd argue that they were top tier for, I guess, both burst attack and burst defense until the God Layer era, when things like Stationary Valkyrie, Stationary I2, or whatever stopped becoming viable just because of the intense weight of the God Layers. But either way, these discs were always just super underappreciated during the time that they were viable, and I believe only like one person ever used down competitively. A few people used armed because I tried to make it a thing, but no one ever really used these discs despite them being really tough to burst and making that pretty good for burst attack and burst defense.
So number 8 on this list is also kind of two parts, but it's as a god disc. It's 2 cross. People will think that, oh, it's not gonna be good because it's not 4 or 7 and it's not glaive or meteor, and that's just like a really bad way of thinking, because if people think, oh, if it's not already top tier, it's not gonna be good, then nothing will ever be good except for what's already good. But anyways, 2 cross. 2 is just mainly because I find it synergizes really well with cross. I mean, if you even look at the shape, they kind of match up. Like the 2 points do there. There's not really points there, but it's like an even distribution. I find it to work really well in, I guess, attacker combos. I haven't tested it with Seek Excalibur yet, but it lines up really well with the points on Excalibur. I like it. It was also really tight on my Vaulty Rec, and I tried it for something else. Oh yeah, and Cross actually does not have a bad amount of life after death either. So like, it's not as good as Glaive, but it's passable, and I found like Cross transitions really well into a survive size tip, which made me try like DF 2 cross Euro, except I learned that Euro is actually wider than survive, so oh well. But anyways, that's a setup worth exploring. Something cross on a survive shaped tip like survive or Flugel. And oh yeah, and people tend not to use 2 because 4 and 7 are both heavier, but 2 tends to work better with cross just because they match up, and people also forget that heavier doesn't always mean better, especially in burst, when having a heavier disc will make you more likely to burst most of the time. So I guess, and in the case of like stuff like Seek Excalibur that's so heavy it can barely move sometimes, lighter might be better in that situation. So definitely give 2 cross a shot, especially on an attack combo. I know Legend Spriggan and Seek Excalibur are both 4th-sided, this is 4-sided. You might find it's better than 7 Meteor. Definitely give it a shot.
So number 7 is Cycle, which is the driver that comes with Jail Yorgament, and I feel like it's a pretty underrated part just because it's kind of like Hold in that it's a poor man's atomic. I was getting, Drain Fafnir Polished Cycle was going about like 40-60 with right spin atomic combos, or right spin 4-glaive atomic, so it's not going to be as consistent as Polished Atomic is versus them,
but it still has a chance of beating them. Um, yeah, it's a poor man's Atomic, considering that Atomic is only available in the random booster in that like $50 4-pack so far. So, if you can't afford to get Atomic, Cycle might be your next best bet. Like I said, it's not as good as Atomic, but it can still serve its uses. It also can beat Polished Cycle can beat pretty much anything opposite spin that doesn't have any kind of like Procession or LAD. So like if you're up against something like Death Scythe or Heavy Defense, Drain Fafnir Polished Cycle is gonna beat that. But yeah, it's a poor man's Atomic. Needs a little more attention. I think there's actually a part in the K versus the World video where I point out, or he specifically selected the clip where I say that Drain Fafnir Polished Cycle was a good choice because he'd already used his Atomic on Maximum Garuda. So yeah, there's that. Number 6 has been a part that's always been useful, just it's the matchups where it's useful are pretty small and not very frequent competitively. Basically, Unite is the number 6 part. It's got from Storm Spriggan, Spryzen S2 for the Hasbro version. It's got some pretty great KO defense. It's basically CS from MFB, which is like the tip that saved defense back when like Lightning Eldrago and Gravity Perseus ruled the MFB meta. But basically, Unite is good because it's got more stamina than Extreme because of that plastic part in the middle. It's also got it's pretty hard to KO too, so it's pretty much exclusively a counter to Extreme. It can outspin some Excel combos depending on like what layer and disc both people are using, but it's pretty much limited to just resisting Extreme and other KO attackers. And now that we have things like Legend Spriggan, Twin Nemesis, and Seek Excalibur running around in the meta, it might see more use on like Alter Chronos Unite. Could be used to resist getting KO'd by those a bit more than something like Atomic could, even though it'll have like 0 Procession for opposite spin. And the Hasbro version specifically supposedly has a lot of stamina compared to like the Takara counterpart. I know at least my Blaze Ragnarok on Atomic was actually outspun by Doom Scissor D2 on the Hasbro Unite one, so it might be something to consider. Alright, and keeping the paper for this one, number 5 is going to be probably one of my favorite parts in Burst actually. It's this layer here. Hold on, let me refocus the camera. There we go, Gigan Gaia. It's marketed as a balance layer, and I honestly like have trouble remembering that because of how amazing it is at defense. Like, it's got this pretty round-ish shape, really strong teeth, and it might be outclassed by Alter Chronos at this point. I think it might have slightly stronger defense, but Chronos has better stamina. But either way, this is like an amazing defensive part. I think it's probably one of the best right spin defensive layers. Just gets overlooked because the stamina is so bad. It doesn't have bad burst attack either. Like, it's capable of like Valkyrie will self burst against it. V2 self bursts against it occasionally. Can burst things like Death Scyther and probably Guardian Kirbyus if you get it spinning fast enough and there's enough contact. So Gigan Gaia, super underrated defense layer. Alright, I just didn't bother, like, I started with a part on the screen so we don't have to worry about refocusing the camera. 4 is the Yell Disc. Kind of just didn't get a ton of appreciation because of how short of its time window was. It kind of suffered from the same problem that Euro did back between the transition between the basic layers and the dual layers. But basically this was released at the end of the dual layers, right before all the God discs came out. Actually surprisingly heavy. It's about 21.3 I think mine is. I'm not sure what the official weight is, but it's almost as heavy as heavy. super wide, wider than spread. I don't know if it's as wide as outer. Probably about the same width as outer. And it's got this smooth edge also. It's wide enough so that like if you put it on one of the wider god layers, it'll touch the ground before the god layer does, at least in the case of Drain Fafnir. Anyways, Yell is good because it's got, well, I guess I want to say the second best right spin life after death behind outer, which is banned because it's too hard to get. But it's not too great same spin stamina, but it's good for life after death. I think 4 glaive or 7 glaive is a little better in left life after death wise, but I'm tempted to believe this is a little better than right spin glaive, just because of the way the points work on glaive point the wrong direction for right spin. So probably not top tier anymore, but definitely worth looking at. Yell is still an interesting part, still good, still usable. Number 3 is another relatively older driver that's making a comeback. It's Variable, which was first introduced with Victory Valkyrie and Voltirec V2 for you Hasbro people. Basically, along with these new attackers, people have noticed that like if you put them on Variable, they become a little harder to control, or they're not as bad control-wise because they're so heavy. They're a little easier to control on Variable than some of the lighter things. And it's also got a lot more aggression because it's a wider tip. And one super great combo that deserves more attention in my opinion, not just because I made it up, but because like I think it's legitimately a good combo, is Los Longinus Polished Variable. Just because Variable's super wide, it's kind of got like a good amount of precession too, which if you get it at the right wear height, which is kind of the problem, it'll transition perfectly into polish. And since L2 is left spin, it can also it can outspin things that it can't KO, which isn't a lot. Like if you look at the K vs the World video, it's pretty violent even against something as heavy as Sieg Excalibur on Revolve. The Hasbro variable is also worth mentioning too. The spikes don't wear down as fast in the Hasbro version, and the rubber is like a little grippier too. Like I don't know if it's softer, but it's a little more grippy. Makes it a little better for KO attack and control. I know things like Spryce and S2, Voltirec, possibly Excalius or some other stuff are good on the Hasbro variable. Alright, number 2 is Acid Anubis, which is another part of Acid Anubis that kind of got just screwed over by its release date compared to other things. Basically, the one time it was ever relevant in competitive play was during the 2017 championship. While Death Scyther was banned, this thing kind of took its place as like the high stamina layer with not a ton of defense. I actually lost to it 5-0 or 5-1 because I was using the speed launcher with my Odin and I just choked with attack. But no one's ever like directly compared the two. It's definitely got less stamina than Guardian Kirbyus, as in like Guardian Kirbyus was able to outspin Maximum Garuda consistently while A2 wasn't. But it also outspins Death Scyther, so it's probably around the same level as Death Scyther. No one's ever directly compared the two. It can beat Neptune. I outspun it with my Odin once before the battle got restarted, so it's probably around Death Scyther or Odin level. Definitely like worth a shot, even though it probably can't stand up to like any kind of attacker nowadays. It's about as useful as like Death Scyther or GK or Odin would be nowadays. Totally overlooked at this point, just because it was only ever seen as a replacement to Death Scyther. Try it out. Alright, and the number 1 most underrated part in Beyblade Burst is weight. The Zillion Zeus driver and the Psychic Phantom driver. So basically, for whatever reason, people think weight just sucks. They think that like it's a completely useless part. It was the heaviest driver for a while until I think Cycle took over. There might be something heavier now, but I'm not sure. So it's useful in things like Lost Longinus, Gravity Weight, which was the heaviest combo for a while. Because it had just great. It was hard to KO because it was so heavy. Had decent attack power too. But basically, like, what weight is really good at, I think it is the best semi-mobile, like, burst attack-ish driver that there is. Better than Orbit. Better than, I guess, Needle, or what else was it? Semi-mobile. Yeah, Needle, Orbit. Atomic self-bursts too much to be used for, like, burst attack, in my opinion. So weight, I think, is the best for that, because it has, like, the metal ball in the center for more RPM. The low friction tip to reduce the friction with the ground. Like, I don't know how many times I'm gonna say this, but like Valkyrie armed weight, even with like a worn Valkyrie, it was taking out maximum Garuda consistently when I was playtesting it at the tournament. This is against another person that knew what they were doing, and I was using this with a worn Valkyrie, and I was just destroying it. Also, the UK people used Lost Longinus on Orbit. They got the idea from Extreme Blader 3, who used it to just wreck a few Drain Fafnir combos. It's very similar to the Lost Longinus Gravity Weight combo that K used. Could also probably be used with Sieg Excalibur too. Sieg Excalibur 4 cross weight, 2 cross weight, I don't know. That's probably a pretty solid combo too. But like, I think not only is it just, it's got some decent procession and life after death too, because of this little ring on the side. It's not as good as like Atomic is, obviously, or even Revolve, but it's not bad. Like, I know it can outspin things that like aren't designed to outprocess things, if that makes any sense. But weight is just, I think, super underrated in my opinion. Because not only do people think it just absolutely sucks when that's not the case at all, it's like low-key probably top tier, and no one ever uses it. Like, I've had a few chances to use it and then just didn't because I opted for extreme attack instead. But like, in both cases, I think weight would have been a better option. So there you go. The number one most underrated part, in my opinion, in all of Beyblade Burst is this driver, weight. And yeah, that's it for my BuzzFeed article, guys. I don't know what video is going up next, but I'll know when I upload it, and then you'll know when it goes live. So I'll see you then.